What is going on in the real estate world right now? Is the market going to crash? Should you wait until you buy your home? Questions hopefully we can answer today. I'm Brad Bald, real estate lawyer.
I'm mortgage lender Austin Barnard.
And I'm Chad LaChance, real estate broker.
Let's head in.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
Fellas, we hear so many negative buzzwords around town, such as market crashing, recession. Are we at another 2008? What do you guys think is going to happen in Nashville? And I'll start with you, Chad.
So that's a question that I get almost on the daily basis. Everybody's like, should I wait to buy a house? Is the market crashing? I see things are cooling off. And in my opinion, no, I don't think we're headed for a market crash. I think what we're seeing is a normalization of the market. So the way we've looked for the last couple of years, it's just been crazy. I mean, buyers haven't been able to negotiate for anything. Sellers have been able to get, anything and everything they want. But with the rising interest rates, it's really changing things so that the market is, like I said, it's stabilizing, it's normalizing a little more. So that allows buyers to have a little more negotiating power. But more importantly, I think what I like to point out with it is that it's just cooling the market off a little bit so that things aren't as crazy as they were. So everybody kind of has an equal chance to, to get a house.
Yeah,
so.
Awesome.
I would say from an economic standpoint, when we think about a recession, right, it's basically 2 quarters of negative GDP. So we already know that the first quarter of this year came out with negative GDP. We're anticipating it to be flat this next quarter, but they're never going to tell you whether it's going to be negative or positive, right?
Sure.
The biggest thing to keep in mind, though, is that even in the past 6 recessions that we've had, only 2 of those have actually caused a decrease in house value. So even if, let's just say we did go into a recession or we are considered to be in a recession, the fact that your house is going to devalue or the opportunity you're going to have to buy make it worse is just, in my opinion, unrealistic.
Sure.
I feel like we as a whole in Nashville are kind of in a good spot to be in, to say the least. And we can kind of dig into that a little bit deeper as well. But I don't foresee that happening in our market right now.
What's fascinating is, Nashville has such a growing job market, right? It's got the #1 city for economic growth, extremely low unemployment rate right now. You got companies like Oracle, Amazon, and Facebook all coming into town. I mean, Austin, you and I read that article of an $800 million facility for Facebook out in Gallatin. I mean, that's massive. People need a spot to stay when they move to town. So I think that's very, very fascinating. Jumping on, Chad, you mentioned it earlier, Nashville market normalizing. Let's dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is, we've been on this uptick of, home prices just skyrocketing over the last couple of years. So what I mean by normalizing is things are gonna, from what I can see, gonna kind of plateau for a little bit. Maybe a slight downtick in property value, but minuscule. I mean, what we're seeing is things are just stabilizing, and we really saw a market correction that was long overdue. I mean, Nashville property taxes are super low. Home prices were super low compared to other big cities in the country. So we're really just kind of catching up to the rest of the big cities, and we're still not anywhere near the housing costs and property tax values that those other cities are showing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's fascinating now that people are always on alert when a home is listed longer than 24 hours on the MLS. And buyers aren't having to go in and give up their 3rd kid to get the deal done.
Right.
So I think it allows for a lot more creative opportunities on behalf of the agent, on behalf of the lender, to come in and come up with a strategic plan to get the deal done, as opposed to basically saying, we don't want any contingencies at all. We just want the deal. We'll give you $100,000 over offer and call the deal. I think it's changing.
I have to agree. From what I'm seeing on a daily basis, I mean, it's coming down. Homes are sitting longer. And I think the biggest shock to people is, like you said, houses were going in the first 24, 48 hours, and now you may see them sitting for a couple weeks.
Yes.
But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, a couple weeks is not abnormal.
Right.
That's, prior to this kind of boom in the housing market, that was absolutely normal. I mean, even a few months was normal. So that we're just getting more stabilized and things are sitting. Buyers have more inventory to look at because things aren't moving quite as fast. There aren't as many buyers in the market with the interest rates being a little higher. So they're able to be a little picky and choose and negotiate. And, so we're back to the way real estate had been prior to the last couple of years.
Sure. And Austin, coming to you, I've seen a lot of buyers very intimidated about the rising interest rates. From a lender perspective, how would you guide a buyer through that conversation?
Yeah, so I pretty much have a very similar conversation with every single one of my buyers, especially right now, and that is strictly that interest rates rose so quickly. I mean, if you look at it from January to today, I mean, just that bond market curve is like completely abnormal, right? So the biggest thing I'm telling everybody is that this is not going to last. Like, we know that. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are actually capping rates, meaning a lot of times you have to buy to get an interest rate because they don't want to offer higher interest rates. They know that somebody's going to refinance in 6 months from now and they're going to end up losing their financial investment, right? So that's one sign. The other sign is that everything that we're seeing from a market standpoint, from everything that I'm reading from the financial analysts and everything like that, are basically showing us that come Q1 of next year, around the February-March timeframe, interest rates should be coming back down. So I'm telling every single one of my buyers, look, focus more on your monthly payment, focus more on the affordability of being able to maintain that over a year, and then when rates do come down, you can refinance and drop that payment down by, depending upon your purchase price and loan amount, it could be hundreds of dollars. So it's very temporary. Don't just focus on that one number, as it's going to be longevity for 30 years.
Sure. And Chad, here's a question for you that you might not have been prepared for, but outside of the Nashville-Davidson County, right? You got folks that have lived in Nashville and they want a place to live, but they may be capped out of the Nashville market. With all these companies growing outside the sphere of Davidson County, where would you recommend on some areas to point buyers to?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've got a lot of clients. Murfreesboro is a vastly growing city.
Right.
That's always been a huge spot for, at least for the last 5-10 years, that a lot of people are kind of navigating that way. I mean, you can go as far as, like, you had mentioned Facebook earlier, right? So Gallatin, Hendersonville area, anywhere in Wilson County, Lebanon, Mount Juliet, even as far north as like Clarksville, Springfield. I mean, there's so many options. That's what's cool about Middle Tennessee, is it's a very short drive to get to a lot of different towns around us that are, nice and secluded, but still close enough that you can get to town when you need to. Pretty unique.
So with all that being said, guys, if you're advising a buyer and they come up and say, you know what, let's give it 6 months, let's give it 8 months, maybe a year, I'll consider buying, maybe interest rates will go down a bit, maybe the market, the prices will go down. How do you guys handle those conversations?
Yeah, I actually get that question probably from every buyer I have right now. The biggest thing I always say is the best time to buy was a year ago. The next best time to buy is yesterday. Ultimately, home values are going to continue to appreciate, so that's not really going to change. That $350,000 house may be $400,000 next year. So you're taking that into consideration. And the other thing to keep in mind is interest rates are temporary. The market's constantly changing. We've seen a spike since January to today that is kind of unprecedented. I mean, that really hasn't happened. COVID went the opposite direction unprecedentedly. Now it came back up. That's not going to last forever. So what I always tell people to do is focus on that monthly payment. Don't focus on the interest rate. You can always refinance that 6 months, 12 months from now, even if it's 2 years from now. That payment should come back down. You can always re-amortize it over 30 years. But again, the financial affordability of that monthly payment is the biggest thing you want to focus on, while you're also building equity. If you're just paying somebody rent, somebody else is getting that equity from you. Why don't you just go ahead and do that? And you're gonna, again, the house value, if you decide to sell 2 years from now, then you can always do that and get that equity back out of it.
Housing prices, I don't see them going down. I mean, and what are you going to do 2 years from now? The house that you wanted at $350 might be $400,000 now, and you can't afford it. So, I mean, buying now, even with the interest rates which I'd like to point out are pretty historically low, even at their current point.
Right. Which a lot of buyers, they don't want to hear.
Right. It's such a shocker because they were so low for the last couple of years that, that little bit of uptick feels like a huge amount. And it is, to be fair, but, historically it's still really low.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now houses are as cheap as they're going to be. So
That's a good point.
And I would say one pushback from what Chad said, I think it's a great point that we are still historically low from an interest rate perspective. I've actually told clients that here recently and had a little bit of pushback to saying, yes, interest rates are still maybe historically low, but I'm paying more for my house. And then I always respond with the next best answer, which is yes, but also income levels have increased since the time frame, right? I mean, I think we had 9% increase in income last year. That's supposed to continue to increase, especially in Nashville with Oracle coming in. That's a very high-paying industry, Facebook, everything like that. Their income levels are rising to be able to maintain those monthly payments. And again, as I said before, it's all temporary.
And a good point is also is the client can always refinance down the road, right? Whether that's a year, couple of years, or several years down the road. We don't know, but that's why lenders offer the products of refinancing and also taking out HELOCs. Home equity lines of credit are a great way to pull equity out from your home with the rising appreciation in Nashville. Now, Chad, with you being a stud realtor and Austin, you being a stud lender, and me as the attorney for a title company, how crucial is it to work with a knowledgeable, emphasis on fun, team to close a transaction? And how important is that for the buyer or seller on a deal?
Well, for me, it's, I choose very carefully who I recommend that I work with. And it's all based off of experience, past deals that I've done. I want to know that the people that I'm working with, I can pick up the phone at any point if I have a question or something's, gone wrong, that I can get a hold of the person I need to get a hold of. That's crucial. And also, it doesn't hurt to have somebody that's fun and not dry, to deal with in the process. But it's so crucial that everybody involved knows what they're doing and can get it done under the strict timelines that we're working with.
I would say the biggest thing, just from personal experience, there's so many different ways to go at a transaction, right? You have 30 days to pull what I'm going to say 10 or 15 moving parts together. So having at least 3 people that control the vast majority of those moving parts that know exactly what to do, they've done it multiple times together before, makes that whole process just seamless. You can always find an agent, you can always find a lender, you can always find a title company, but being able to find 3 people that are experts that have worked together that can make that 30-day process feel like 5 days for you is a big difference.
Yeah, and what's important, that buyers really, when they get under contract, they have no idea what I do. They have no idea what a title company does. But the crucial part is the communication from me to the lender as well as me to the realtor, because you guys want to be able to pick up your phone, right? Our staff is great, right? They are very communicative. They will shoot off emails as fast as possible. But it may be a question where you just want to pick up the phone and call me or text me, and I'm happy to answer that for you. But when it comes down to closing experience, that's where I always say, us at Row Title, that's where we shine, because that is the first introduction I get to have with these buyers and sellers. They come into our office located on Music Row. I want to be personable. My job is to clearly explain every single one of these documents so they have zero questions down the road. And that way I can explain to them they're getting title owner's insurance policy, especially to the buyer, and what that protects them against down the road. That is very, very crucial for them to know. And not just up until closing, but post-closing, right? Because how many issues can come up after closing? They're entitled to get their owner's insurance policy as well as a copy of the warranty deed within 30 to 60 days. They want to be able to have my contact information if they get crazy spam letter, including the deed fraud that goes around where they offer you $90 or so for a true and correct copy of their warranty deed. If I'm not explaining all this process at the closing table, they may freak out, call you guys and say, my title attorney never explained that to me. So it's my job to make sure I explain everything at that closing table. And then we have some fun, pop a little champagne, get a closing photo, and everybody leaves happy.
And I would even brag on Chad for a minute and just know that, when you're going through the purchasing side of things, or even the listing side of things, having somebody that can market your property, actually knows how to write a contract, actually knows what your house is worth, actually know what to put an offer in on the purchase side is kind of rare. I hate to say that, but a lot of agents don't know that.
It's true.
Cannot actually factually figure those numbers out and help advise you in that way. And I would even say from my side, a lender, there's banks and mortgage companies everywhere that's going to lend money to you. But there's a difference between just giving you money for, hey, I need a $300,000 loan, and actually advising you from looking at your credit report and say, hey, you have $30,000 in credit card debt that you're paying 20% interest on. Why don't you pay that off, use some of your equity, and maybe have a little bit larger of a mortgage, but that difference in your mortgage payment for $30,000 is minuscule compared to the interest you're going to pay on that credit card. So there's so many layers to it that having experts in our fields can do for you.
That's a big thing too, and I always tell clients, work with the lender, because just because you're approved for or pre-approved for a $600,000 house doesn't necessarily mean you should be buying a $600,000 house, right?
Right.
So it's always important to talk to the lender and talk about where you're comfortable at on your mortgage payment, and that's where someone like you comes in, because you're able to factor in all those different points that go into a mortgage payment other than just the baseline of it. So it's very crucial that clients are comfortable with where they're going to be. I see people try to get in over their heads a lot of times, and yes, it's doable, but it's probably not the smartest thing.
It's very, very, very true. Because if one part of the closing process is off, then the whole transaction can go bye-bye, right? That's why it's so imperative to have a good team, realtor, lender, and title company, to be able to facilitate everything smoothly. Because, some instances I've seen where the realtor will go out of the country and they will be gone and they won't be able to get a hold of their buyer or seller, or the lender just is totally out of the question. He's not responding to emails, not responding to text, and we're sitting here at the closing table, whether Chad, you come up and we're sitting there with the buyer and we're still waiting on the loan package, but we can't get a hold of the lender. And all that is important to have that close communication, right? Because mistakes do happen, right? But it's just being able to quickly jump over that hurdle and get to the next step. That's what we're here to do.
Yep, and that's a great point that I wanted to make as well, that there's no such thing as a perfect transaction. Exactly. Every transaction, something is going to come up, whether it be on the title side, the lender side, or the realtor side.
Right.
Things are going to go wrong, and it's so important to have experienced people in your pocket that are able to work through those things quickly, sometimes without you even having to be made aware.
Right.
A lot of times things can be resolved just with a quick phone call.
Sure.
So you want those people in your corner that are able to fight for you and get those things done without freaking out about it.
And shout out to the inspection team and our insurance agents. We don't want to leave them hanging out to dry, because they're a big part of the closing as well. So you insurance agents out there, inspection, we're thinking about you. But yeah, guys, I'm so glad that we're able to do this and have these questions. And for the buyers and sellers out there, we encourage you guys to reach out to us if you guys have any questions or concerns about anything throughout this process. Again, I'm Brad Bald, real estate and title attorney for the Road Title and Escrow.
I'm Austin Barnard, First Community Mortgage.
And I'm Chad LaChance with Benchmark Realty.
It's been a day.
Thank you.
Thank you.